Between 8 and 13 July 1992, witness 75 and witness 87 were taken from Foča High School to various locations on 3 separate occasions. On the first, the women were taken to an apartment owned by Mr. Zelenović. There, he and 3 other men raped witness 75. Mr. Zelenović also raped witness 87 on that occasion. On the second occasion, the women were taken to another apartment where Mr. Zelenović again raped them. On the third occasion, Mr. Zelenović took the women to an abandoned house in Gornje Polje where he raped witness 87. On the 13th of July 1992, the detainees of Foča High School were transferred to Partizan Sports Hall, where they were detained for 1 month, after which most detainees were deported to Montenegro. The detainees were all Muslim civilians from villages in Foča municipality. Living conditions at Partizan Sports Hall were brutal, and the detention was characterized by inhumane treatment, starvation, and physical and psychological torture, including sexual assaults. On one occasion in July 1992, Mr. Zelenović and other men took witness 87 away from Partizan Sports Hall and raped her. On another occasion, in August, witness 87 and witness 75 were taken from Partizan Sports Hall and detained in a house known as Kaarman's house. From there, at the end of October of that same year, Mr. Zelenović and 2 co-perpetrators took witness 87, witness 75, and 2 other women to an apartment in Foča. There, Mr. Zelenović raped witness 87, while the co-perpetrators raped the other women. Mr. Zelenović pleaded guilty to all the incidents of torture and rape mentioned. We now come to the sentencing considerations. The prosecution has recommended that Mr. Zelenović be sentenced to imprisonment within the range of 10 to 15 years, while the defense has recommended a term within the range of 7 to 10 years. In determining the appropriate sentence, the Chamber has assessed the gravity of Mr. Zelenović's crimes, including the nature of the crimes of torture and rape as crimes against humanity, the particular circumstances of the case, and the form and degree of participation of Mr. Zelenović. The crimes to which Mr. Zelenović has pleaded guilty were part of a pattern of sexual assaults that took place over a period of several months and in many different locations and involved multiple victims. Mr. Zelenović took direct part in the sexual abuse of victims in a number of detention facilities, including multiple rapes of witness 75 and witness 87. Mr. Zelenović has been found guilty of personally committing 9 rapes, 8 of which were qualified as both torture and rape. He has also been found guilty of 2 instances of rape through co-perpetratorship, one of which was qualified as both torture and rape, and 1 instance of torture and rape through aiding and abetting. 4 of the rapes he took part in were gang rapes, together with 3 or more other perpetrators. In one of those instances, he participated as aider and abetter in the gang rape of witness 75 by at least 10 soldiers, which was so violent that the victim lost consciousness. He participated as co-perpetrator in an incident during which the victim was threatened with a gun to her head while being sexually abused. The trial chamber finds that the scale of the crimes committed was large, and that Mr. Zelenović's participation in the crimes was substantial. The victims in this case were in a particularly vulnerable situation at the time of the commission of the crime. They were unarmed and defenseless, and detained under brutal conditions for long periods of time. In addition, witness 87, who was raped by Mr. Zelenović on numerous occasions, was about 15 years old at the time of the commission of the crimes. The women and girls in the detention centers lived in constant fear of repeated rapes and sexual assaults. Some became suicidal, and others became indifferent to what happened to them. The victims at the detention centers in Foča suffered the unspeakable pain, indignity, and humiliation of being repeatedly violated without knowing whether they would survive the ordeal. The scars left by the sexual assaults were deep and might never heal. This, perhaps more than anything, speaks about the gravity of the crimes in this case. There are a number of individual circumstances of Mr. Zelenović that have been accorded weight in mitigation. The trial chamber emphasizes, however, that such circumstances do not in any way diminish the gravity of the crime. Mr. Zelenović decided to admit his guilt and plead guilty. There are a number of reasons applicable in the present case why a guilty plea should be attached weight in mitigation. The trial chamber has considered Mr. Zelenović's admission of guilt and decision to face the consequences of his previous acts. The trial chamber has also considered the effect a guilty plea could have on establishing the truth and contributing to reconciliation in the region, and the fact that a guilty plea relieves the victims of horrible crimes from reliving their trauma by being forced to give evidence in court. Finally, the trial chamber has considered the time and effort saved by the tribunal through avoidance of a lengthy trial, although it has given this aspect limited weight. The trial chamber has also given weight to Mr. Zelenović's commitment to cooperate with the office of the prosecutor, including giving evidence in court, and the cooperation he has given so far. The trial chamber has also considered the remorse expressed by Mr. Zelenović for the crimes he has committed as a mitigating factor. Finally, the trial chamber has given limited weight to the following individual circumstances of Mr. Zelenović: his family and health situation, his lack of prior convictions, and his good conduct during detention. The trial chamber has, in determining the sentence, also considered the general practice regarding prison sentences in the courts of the former Yugoslavia, as well as the case law of this tribunal. Mr. Zelenović, would you please stand? For the reasons summarized above, this trial chamber, having considered the facts of the case and the arguments of the parties, the statute and the rules, and based upon the factual and legal findings as determined in the sentencing judgment, hereby sentences you, Mr. Zelenović, to a single sentence of 15 years of imprisonment. You are entitled to credit for the period of time you have been in custody for the purpose of this case. You were arrested by the Russian authorities on the 22nd of August 2005 and are therefore entitled to credit of 591 days. In accordance with Rule 103C of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence, you will remain in the custody of the tribunal pending finalization of arrangements for your transfer to the state where your sentence will be served. The trial chamber stands adjourned.
All rise. Fue full away.